All right, guys, we'll see you next week. Until then, adios.
Conversations from the Dark Side.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to an exciting special edition of Conversations from the Dark Side. I'm your good buddy, Amigo Aaron. Tonight on a solo run, as my good buddy Flack is on assignment this week, but he'll be back next week for our finale for 2023 when we have a show dedicated to your ghost stories. But tonight, something special. I had a chance to talk with local ghost hunter Theresa, and we had a long conversation about how she got into ghost hunting, how the tools of ghost hunting has changed, some of her adventures in ghost hunting, some of her favorite locales, and some conversation about the biggest cases that she ever encountered, and even some conversations about cases outside the field of West Virginia and the area that she stomps in, such as the Amityville Horror House or The Exorcist and whatnot. It's a great conversation, and we had a lot of fun with it. And I think you're going to really enjoy it. And Theresa has been so cordial to really give us a lot of good inside information. If you're into ghost hunting, I think you'll find this fascinating. If you're just into ghost stories, I think you'll find it enthralling. And even if you're not into either one of those, I think you'll find Theresa charming and professional speaker and very interesting and entertaining. So I hope you'll stick around this week. Conversations from the Dark Side, Ghost Hunting Adventures. We'll be back with that interview in 2 seconds.
You are experiencing Conversations from the Dark Side.
Hello, everyone. We're here with a very special guest this evening on Conversations from the Dark Side. Please welcome Theresa. Theresa, welcome to the show.
Hey, thanks for having me, Aaron.
Beautiful. Now, for those that don't know about you or your credentials, Theresa is I don't want to say lifelong ghost hunter, but certainly most of your lifelong interest in the paranormal that you took to the next level. Can you talk to us about was there a singular event that got you interested in the paranormal? And when it happened, what did you do?
Well, there really wasn't one singular event that got me into this field. It really started way, way, way back when I was little with my grandparents. They were good Appalachians. They were mostly of Scots, Irish, and Cherokee descent. And when I would go to Beckley to stay the weekend with them or stay even a whole month with them in the summertime, instead of bedtime stories, they would tell me ghost stories from when they were kids or local hauntings. You know, it was just, that was something that was accepted. A lot of folklore, a lot of belief in what we call like mountain witches. You know, if Mama told you not to go somewhere on a certain day, you did not go on that certain day. So it was kind of ingrained early on. And that's when I really kind of got the interest. Okay, I like what's cool. I like what's spooky and mysterious. But then things kind of made a turn when I was 9. And we moved into a new house. My mom had gotten married. And this house had a reputation of being haunted. So everybody was seeing, specifically what we were seeing the most was a man that would walk down our hallway. And everybody in the family saw this. Even people without, outside the family saw this. And my mom was extremely skeptical. And she was always like, well, no, it wasn't a ghost. It was this or this or this. And I knew that probably not everything that I was experiencing was paranormal. But I wasn't really happy with these like blanketed statements like, oh, this is because of this. So that's when I really started getting into researching the paranormal and finding out, what could be paranormal? What's definitely not paranormal? What's going on here? And luckily, my friends were pretty spooky too. They were all into the legend tripping, going to, spooky haunted bridges and creepy cemeteries at night. So my friends were really on board. And we started doing some kind of amateur ghost hunting back then. And by the time I graduated high school, I was like, this is absolutely, I want to take it to the next level. I have a good understanding of what is paranormal and what is definitely not. I have experience living in a haunted house. So maybe I could use these things and help other people that were dealing with the same thing that I was.
Very good. Now, you came out of school, you were set, your mindset was there. Now, a lot of people may or may not know this, but you are the proprietor of one of the top blogs, paranormal blogs, certainly in the area. How long ago did you start that? What prompted that? And what has become of it? Like, I know we've been around many festivals and whatnot where people have cited this blog as being important to their various activities. Can you shed some light over? And also, you might want to go ahead and give them the address for the blog while you're at it.
All right, well, it's Theresa's Haunted History of the Tri-State. And if you just Google Theresa's Haunted History, I'm on all the socials and it comes up. But the blog itself was never really supposed to be a blog. So back when I decided that, okay, I want to take this to the next level, right out of high school, this was back in 2001, and there were maybe 2 investigative teams here in West Virginia, and neither one of them wanted anything to do with an 18-year-old girl fresh out of high school. So I started doing a lot of research on my own, trying to find some haunted places, and eventually I was able to connect with some people who were paranormal investigators and welcomed me. Unfortunately, this was an older group of people, and they just didn't really have a whole lot of time, didn't have a whole lot of interest in doing a lot of, boots on the ground field research. So it was about 2006 online is when I actually found a group that had just started in Huntington. It's called Huntington Paranormal. And I quickly joined up, and, they were, it was great. I finally had found, my tribe. Like, these people wanted to do the exact same thing that I wanted to do. At the same time, I had just recently gotten my degree as a paralegal assistant. So I knew my way around the courthouse pretty well. I knew how to do title searches. I knew how to do genealogy research. I knew how to look up wills and deeds and all that good stuff. So somehow I kind of got thrust into the appointment of historical research manager, which suited me fine because I thought it was awesome. So still around this time, when new groups were looking for places to investigate, there was kind of one main website that everybody went to. And you want me to say it?
Go ahead.
It's still around, and it's a great website. It's called the Shadowlands.
Oh, man. That was what I heard about for a
yeah,
while.
it's over 20 years old. But unfortunately, it's user-based. So all of the entries on there are just anybody that had a computer could put on there anything that they wanted. And it wasn't, moderated, nobody fact-checked it. And so it was kind of a good place to start, but not a great place to start if you were looking for actual haunted locations to investigate. So I decided that for my team, we had a little in-house message board, forum back then. And, eventually we had opened it up to the public. And it started out as I would go through, places like Shadowlands and pick out some of the better locations. Because there were some locations like, Uncle Joe's barn down by the holler. And it's like, how are you ever going to find that?
Yeah.
But there were some that, were fairly famous historical locations. So I started with those and just kind of writing a summary and compiling a list of resources if we wanted to investigate those locations. And that started out on the message board. Well, we shut down the message board because, we really didn't need it. And I was like, maybe if our team is benefiting from this, other teams could benefit from it. And I didn't know anything about web design, web pages. I didn't have any money to invest in it. So I went with old free webs. And that was the first incantation of Theresa's Haunted History since 2006. it was great for a while. The problem was it got real popular. And I exceeded my monthly bandwidth by like the third or fourth of the month.
Yeah.
So I couldn't add anything new and people couldn't get on it. And so by 2011, I was like, man, I've really got to do something different. I still want it to be easy. I don't want to put any money in it. And so I found WordPress,
The old standby.
yeah.
WordPress.
And it was so easy. And that's what I still use today.
Now, of course, now you need the extra bandwidth, especially this time of year.
Yeah.
Because this thing gets really lit up around the Halloween season. What would you say your second most popular season would be?
Probably, I don't know. Like, it fluctuates.
Really?
Like, I see fluctuations in the summer because probably people are on vacation and they're visiting these places
Right.
and they want to go. And then in the wintertime, I see a big, uptick too.
Yeah.
And I think that's probably because, people are maybe bored and not getting out in the field and just want to kind of read about some of this stuff.
Let me ask you now. So you're coming out of high school, and eventually you get hooked up with Huntington Paranormal. Now, this was early 2000s, and here we are.
Yeah.
Here we are in 2023 as we record this. What has changed in your methodology when you're out in the field, the tools you use versus what you guys were using back in 2006, 2007, as you were romping and stomping back in those days? And did you really use a lot of, back then, did you use a lot of, mechanical tools and radios and whatnot? Was that stuff really in vogue at the time?
When I first started this in 2001, I started with a regular point and shoot film, 35 millimeter film camera, a flashlight, a micro cassette recorder that we stole from my mom's work. And eventually, by about 2006, I think I had a 1 megapixel digital camera. And then I started adding on the things like very basic EMF meters. I had the Lutron Sperry, which I still have it. It just doesn't work right now.
And what is the Lutons? What is that?
That was the original EMF meter that ghost hunters used.
An EMF, for those that are uninformed, electromagnetic
field.
Yes.
Yeah, it's all around us. There's man-made, there's natural occurring electromagnetic
what's
fields.
the theory behind that when it comes to ghost hunting?
There's a couple of theories. One is why we use them is we're trying to find places of like pockets of man-made EMF fields. And one of the theories is that ghosts or spirits or entities will be able to disrupt the EMF field, maybe even draw on it as a source of energy. So if you're seeing big spikes, if you have a pocket of man-made and you see that being drained, maybe there's something paranormal going on. Really what we found over the years, though, is that some people have high EMF sensitivity. And so where there are large pockets of... we got paranormal activity in the studio. Where you have large pockets of man-made EMF and people are being exposed to that, it can cause feelings of nausea, disorientation. Some people will even start hallucinating if the levels are high enough and they're exposed long enough. We found out that a lot of people that we've investigated for that were having night terrors or other bad dreams, sleep disturbances, was because that their cell phone charger or alarm clock was right by their head,
right.
And they were getting a huge dose.
And also there was the Tesla cage or whatever that can be. What is that thing called? That can be
the Faraday cage that you can fit around.
Thank you. Can be for the funny thing about the EMF meter, you could really almost to a certain extent, if you wanted to, you could call that the debunking tool, because you can go around. How many times have we seen on a TV show or even in your actual explorations where you just come across a place where someone wired the house real bad?
Yeah,
does that happen in the field?
We have gotten that a lot, where we've had to actually refer people to an electrician,
especially around here, because some of the places you've went, and I know this, for from trailers to really old houses that weren't even wired at the beginning, and they'd been post-wired in the 20s or whatever.
Absolutely.
Now, aside from the EMF detector, what else were you using back in the old days versus what you're using now?
Well, I mean, to jump back to your question about how things changed. Okay, so the EMF meter, you're right. We use it largely as a debunking tool.
Yeah.
But, oh God, about maybe 10 years ago, an EMF tool called the K2 meter came out. And that's the one with the little pretty lights on it.
Very
and
popular.
That's the one people started using as actually trying to communicate as a ghost communication tool. So that's one thing that's absolutely changed since I've been in this field. Back then, I mean, really, cameras, voice recorders, real basic stuff.
When it comes to cameras, and of course, even when in your oldest ghost hunts, did you guys use a film camera ever, or did you always use a digital camera?
Like I said, back in my high school days, we did use a film camera.
Yeah. Because I know there's a certain sect of people that don't think that you can get a proper paranormal photo with a digital camera. Do you have a school of thought on that yourself?
Not particularly. I think that in order to progress this field, we have to accept and integrate the new technology, but not forget about the old technology. Our group actually has an old Polaroid that we use. Have we caught anything on it? Maybe. But the same thing goes for, our digital voice recorders. A lot of people swear that digital voice recorders are the best, the only way to capture spirit voices. And others think that the old cassette tapes are the way that, you're going to have that psychic imprintation directly on the tape or on the film itself. And that's the best way to get our evidence.
I will say the one thing that the one advantage that the digital recorder has is that you don't have a actually rotating mechanism, because I've heard many times a noise that gets attributed to something, and what it is it's a cassette player where the motor, the belts are going bad. It's making a squeal or a noise. So I guess that's one advantage the digital would have. Now, there have been some, and I wanted to ask you about these more recent tools that I know you didn't use back in the day, including like laser grids, and the machine that actually speaks, the AM/FM scanner.
Yeah.
Can you talk about those things?
Yeah. So the way kind of things have progressed since I first got into this, things were kind of maybe, I don't want to say passive, but they really kind of were, because back when I started this, there were really no ghost hunting tools. We used tools from other fields, cameras, EMF meters, all this stuff, and just kind of tweaked them to use in our field. Past, not even 10 years, 5 to 10 years, there has been an explosion on the market of tools that are strictly designed for paranormal investigation, like the spirit boxes. We have an S-Box. There used to be this thing called the old Radio Shack hack. And those types of spirit boxes are all the same thing. It's scanning radio frequencies, and you just go in, and if you have like the old radio, this is what is called the Shack hack. People would buy an old cheap FM AM radio from Radio Shack, and they'd go in there and break the mechanism that stopped it from just keeping scanning. So we've got those, but then they've also evolved into certain apps and other tools where you can ask yes or no questions and it will say yes or no. Or like the Obelisk, which will actually give you a dictionary of spoken words. And so kind of the focus has really leaned more on this, in real-time communication. Before, we used to have to listen to our voice recordings and go back and watch our cameras to see if anything happens. Now we can kind of theoretically interact in real time.
Now, explain to me this, and I've seen this in use, and I don't know what the name of it is. I think you mentioned it. There's a gimmick that shoots lasers down a hall and and create almost like a grid. And now, and so how do these work? Do these detect motion, or do you use visual cues to tell if the grid was broken?
The laser grid basically is just a light that shoots out, a grid of lasers. Yeah. And if anything breaks that connection, then maybe that's some sort of entity passing by there.
Aren't there some of those that even make a noise when the connection's broken? It's just like
there's all kinds of different things. You're kind of talking too about REM pods, which are basically theremins. I mean, all you're doing is just breaking that connection. We have various motion detectors that have varying degrees of sensitivities. We've got some motion detectors that you can get at Harbor Freight, like $5 for $5. They're just real basic motion detectors. We've got others that are highly more sensitive and that are supposed to measure even the minute of readings of light to see if maybe a shadow goes past. Big thing that's kind of the past year or so people are using are the little light up cat toys, little cat balls. And you used to be able to, you used to be able to get a Petco or even Walmart and get they were like 25 cents each almost. And now they're selling on Amazon for like $8 a piece.
Now, what are these exactly? They're just something that when they get moved, they light up. Is that all they are?
Yeah, when they get moved, they light up.
Now, let me ask you, amongst, and we're going to get to your current group here in a moment, but amongst the tools that your group's currently using, what do you think the cost of these things were, and what's the most expensive thing you've got? What is the most top of the line thing that you guys have? And if you had to evaluate the cost of all your equipment, not counting your own phones, for example, what do you think? Where would we be?
God, I don't know. I mean, most of these tools, it depends.
It went up, though, considerably.
Yeah. Anytime that you buy something from a ghost hunting store or that is marketed specifically towards ghost hunters, it's going to be more. So I have some equipment personally that's, I don't think I've ever paid more than $200 for something.
$200?
And that was for my full spectrum camera and like the full setup.
Oh, yeah.
And you can get, digital voice recorders depending on how fancy you want to get, from 30 and up. K2 meters have dropped in price. You can get those for about $30 now.
So we're talking from $8 all the way up to $200 spectrum.
Pretty much.
That is a wide
and
berth.
of course, there are things that are more expensive. You can get thermal imaging cameras. We're looking at getting a thermal imaging camera. The old Xbox Kinect. If you make your own, it's not that expensive, but if you go out and buy.
Someone finally found a use for those.
Yeah.
Now
they're horrible though. I mean, they're
fun to play with.
They're a lot of fun, but.
Let me ask you, getting back to the thermal that you're talking about, possibly, what's the theory behind the thermal camera for those that haven't heard?
Well, I mean, I guess theoretically that if you have an entity that is trying to manifest, it's going to give off some sort of heat signature or give off a cold spot that's colder than the surrounding area.
Right.
And you should be able to see that.
Very good. Now, you left off with your entrance with the Huntington Paranormal Group. How long were you with them, and when did you transition to your new outfit?
So I was with Huntington Paranormal between 2006 and 2017. And that was just when everybody started kind of going off on their own ways. Some were starting families, people had different goals. So we kind of parted ways in 2017. And it was a lonely couple of years after that. I focused on my blog, but I wasn't out in the field every weekend until 2020. And I know that I had been wanting to look for another group. And I'd even thought about starting my own, but I don't want that kind of responsibility. So I was really happy when on Facebook, it came up on my Facebook feed that a new group had started in Huntington. And basically it was Brian Clary from Huntington had started spectral research and investigations and was looking for members. And I reached out and, we met, and that was kind of the real birth of spectral research and investigations.
Now, before we move on to actual case work here, I would like to ask about the act of ghost hunting in terms of, you've been doing this for a while. And of course, there's a million different methods, right? If one were interested in 2023, anywhere in the world, and getting started or even doing it on their own, what would you say to them in terms of the tips to get into it? Would you recommend that they get into it at all? And if they did want to get into it, they're on a limited budget, what would you recommend that they pick up to assist them?
Well, first I would really have them consider, laying out their goals. Why do you want to get into this field? Do you want just a weekend thrill? Or, are you out to prove to yourself that ghosts exist? Are you out to prove that to others that ghosts exist? Because that's really going to shape, your course of action. But if you're really, intent on finding a group or starting a group, equipment-wise, I would not go out and spend a ton of money to begin with. I would get the absolute basics. Get you a cheap voice recorder, a good flashlight, and really, it's controversial. A lot of people say, like, completely, turn your cell phone off during investigations. There's a lot of stuff that your cell phone can do. It can take excellent pictures. It can take, voice recordings. There's all kinds of apps that, they're not really scientific, but really none of the stuff that we're doing is super, super scientific. So as long as you realize that your phone can cause false positives and do things to mitigate that, your phone's got a lot of good beginner functions on it. But yeah, don't spend a lot of money at first. And I would really suggest, if possible, finding a group that has similar goals and that you trust to kind of shadow for a while and let them show you the ropes. What I don't suggest, and this is also kind of controversial, because back in the day, everybody's like, oh, if you want to get into this, what you need to do is, investigate your house, investigate your friend's house. Absolutely not. If you don't have any experience and don't know what you're doing, you're going to scare yourself to death, because, you're going to, like, find something that may or may not be paranormal. And then you're going to obsess over that. And I don't know, I've seen it happen before, and it's not great. But yeah, read everything you can. Read things from opposing viewpoints. Watch the ghost shows, but kind of watch them for things that maybe you shouldn't do, as well as things that you should do.
They're often baloney. I mean, we know that we've seen enough behind-the-scenes footage from some of these shows.
Yeah.
I mean, it's just like anything on TV. They're spending money to put out a product that they want you to watch. So they're always going to find something. How many times, just for my own edification, you've been on probably 100 or more ghost hunts in your life. How many times did you come home empty-handed?
More than I can count.
Right. So, I mean, a high percentage. So what you're saying is you can't expect to go out and find something on the very first time you go out to ghost hunt. You mentioned something I thought was actually smart. Don't investigate your own house or your buddies. There's always the off chance that you do it for a lark and find something. And now you've got to live there. Investigation's over. Time for bed. Whoa. That's no good. So I can understand that. Now, I want to take a quick break. When we come back, I want to talk to you about some of the actual cases you got into. And I want to talk about some of the work you've been doing in the last month or two, and what you've got upcoming. So everyone stick around. We'll be back with more conversations from the dark side.
You are experiencing Conversations from the Dark Side.
It's the world's only Mothman Museum, the premier destination for Mothman fans. The Mothman Museum is the only place where you can see the largest collection of props and memorabilia from the Mothman Prophecies movie, and read rare historical documents from the Scarborough Mount Mothman eyewitnesses themselves documenting what they experienced that fateful night on November 15th, 1966. The museum is located right next to the Mothman statue on Main Street in Point Pleasant.
You are experiencing Conversations from the Dark Side.
All right, we are back on Conversations from the Dark Side. I am rejoined here by Theresa. She is a legitimate, straight-up ghost hunter who is giving us some of her expertise, sharing a few of her stories. I wanted to talk about, now that we've sort of talked about how you got into ghost hunting and what it takes to get into ghost hunting, one thing I always enjoyed about your work is that you really look at this stuff from the historical aspect, which is something that's I don't think is done enough in this, let's say, field. You know, there a lot of people just barrel in, and you've had the opportunity to look into various cases to the point where you figure out that the entire thing you're investigating doesn't actually exist, or is it real? Which I mean, listen, I appreciate that because that's not what anyone wants to hear in a ghost case or a haunting. Can you give us an example where you actually used your investigatory skills to actually debunk something that wasn't even true in the first place?
Well, I mean, luckily, a lot of times truth is stranger than fiction.
Yeah.
And a lot of times when we have these legends, there is the teeniest, tiniest grain of truth that's buried in there somewhere. I'm trying to think is there something that I've really just...
one, the one that pops to my mind instantly is the dentist. I don't know if you're allowed to talk about that one.
I prefer not to talk about that. That would cause some controversy. But yeah, so we were able, there was a popular dentist office here in West Virginia.
I knew you'd get into it if I poked you.
And it was supposed to be haunted by a young girl.
It was a well-known, I mean, in the paper
Absolutely.
sort of haunting.
There's an episode of The Dead Files about that I consulted on, and when I wouldn't be on camera, they just completely cut me out of it. But I gave them months and months of research. I faxed them a stack of stuff this high on my own dime and didn't even get any research credits for it. And we really didn't debunk, but we found out that the little girl that allegedly died was actually a 21-year-old woman. And that's not to say that she didn't maybe show herself in another form, but she never lived in this house when she was that age. There was a lot of controversy about how she died, and it was really interesting because over the years, I've learned how to incorporate various resources in my research. I'm trained in genealogy, so I really look at the genealogical record, which has helped a lot. You know, I go through the old newspaper archives, both in person and online subscriptions. And I go through, the actual Polk City directories, who actually lived in this place, the vital records, who actually died in this place, the, court deeds, who actually owned the place. And all of these offer little glimpses and little pieces of the puzzle. And so we didn't necessarily outright debunk that, but we found a lot of information that did not fit the narrative that they were trying to portray. She was not an abused child that was killed or neglected to death by her parents. That's a whole other mystery though, because there were 2 different newspaper articles plus her death certificate that all gave different causes of death. One said she fell down the stairs. Another one said that she had bad alcohol, which this happened during Prohibition. So that's very likely that she was, I don't know, where's your audience mostly from? Europe?
We get a worldwide audience.
Yeah. If you guys don't know, during Prohibition here in the United States, the government would actually put out poisoned liquor.
Bad times.
Yeah, just to dissuade people from buying bootleg liquor. So,
we showed them. We just made it up in the hills.
We just made our own up in the hills.
I like that case because of the discrepancy in what you found. Now, how often does that come up where you go, when you look into the history of a place, it doesn't fit the narrative? Because, I mean, we live, especially in the teens of the 2000s when all the ghost shows were real popular. Like, everyone and their brother had a haunted tour and an overnight stay at the haunted this, the haunted that. Did you ever come across someone who was just straight up lying And you did the research, and it was all baloney.
Okay, so unfortunately, no, we've never actually really been able to prove
That's
somebody
actually
was
sort of fortunately, isn't it?
Yeah, oh yeah. But yeah, it absolutely happens. And luckily, like, what we've dealt with more than not is not people straight out lying. Just people who have told the legends that have been passed down. And then we've actually gone back and looked at the historical record and found that it doesn't quite mesh up, but it still doesn't negate that there could be something going on there.
Yeah, I mean, the thing is, when you, especially in a place like this, you go back and look at these records. I mean, I remember my mom had her genealogy, had her genetics done. We always thought we had a lot of Native American blood. We don't have any. It was a real surprise. We always thought we did. So I mean, it'll happen. You can get mixed up on stuff. You can see where these alleged, especially as you mentioned, when you're going back to these old newspapers and stuff, who knows who's writing this stuff and how much artificial poison booze they drank that night.
Even primary sources can sometimes be very, very wrong. My birth certificate, I'm 40, and my birth certificate is incorrect.
Yeah.
So going back, a time where people weren't very literate or didn't really want to trust the government and give them all the information.
So you're talking about modern day West Virginia here. Now, with all that said, I want to go back to your early days.
Okay.
The first time you went on a case and it happened, you were like, bang, I just had the paranormal experience, the big one. Tell us about it, if you remember it. Okay. I assume you did.
So that would probably be way, way, way back in the day. And I had graduated from high school. And I had a friend who was a student in Ohio University. Is that the one in Athens?
Yeah, I think it is.
Okay. It was the one in Athens. And there's a bunch of different legends from up there. And one of them is there is this old asylum that's part of the school property now called the Ridges. And there were, there's a lot of different stories about it being haunted. There's one about, where one of the patients disappeared for like weeks to months, and then they finally found her, and the stain where her body was found is still there, and you can still see it to this day. Unfortunately, we could not get into the Ridges. I guess technically we could, because the person we were with is like, yeah, I can break us in, no problem. But we chose to be ethical.
Little B&E.
We chose to be ethical and not break into the actual Ridges.
Uh-huh.
But
I knew there was a bud coming.
No, we decided, we're going to just walk around because, it's more than one building.
It's like a ground.
Yeah. So we were walking around to the different buildings, and it was me and my best friend, and then her friend that actually went to Athens, and then this guy that our friend knew. He was the one that's going to break us in. Anyway, he was from the area, so he was well versed in everything up there. And my two friends were terrified. I can't even remember exactly what scared them, but they were terrified. So they were sitting in the car, and me and this guy decided to go up the hill to where the children's ward was, where they would have kept the children.
Yeah.
And so we're kind of walking around there. Nothing's really happening. And we hear something. So we're standing up near the building, looking down where the car is. And I feel what feels like a child slip their hand into mine. And this doesn't feel like ethereal or, like it felt like a real child. And I looked down thinking, like, who the hell is this guy getting fresh with me trying to hold my hand? I just met him. And he's like on the other side. Ooh. So I'm holding what feels like this child's hand, and they just kind of, gently squeeze my hand. And at that same point, we hear screaming coming from the car. So from the car. So we take off like running down the hill thinking that they're being attacked by something. And so when I start running, I could feel that, that little hand just slip out of mine, and it stayed there. It didn't come with us. And we get down to the car, we're like, oh my God, what's wrong? And what had happened was they were trying to play back our recording on our stolen micro cassette recorder from my mom's office.
You wouldn't do B&E, but you'll steal.
No, it's still from my mom's office. Limits. Yeah. They were trying to play back the recording, and they couldn't figure it out and had hit the wrong button, and it was like being all like, and it freaked them out.
So it was a false alarm back in the car.
It was a false alarm.
Did you tell them what had happened with you in your hand? So that would be creepy. Very creepy. So have you ever gotten to go into the ridges?
No,
you never have gotten to get into
never
it?
got to go back up there.
Yeah, I'm sure it's something on your list.
I would love to. I'd love to get back
That
in there.
area right there is kind of spooky anyway.
Yeah, they say, okay, so Athens, Ohio, they say is laid out in this circle with a pentagram
Yeah, I've heard that.
of the cemeteries and other haunted places with the college right in the middle.
It's, places are never laid out like a smiley face. You ever notice that? It's always something sinister. I believe it. Now, as you have done this for so long, are there any cases, I'd love to hear about, you can just kind of roll them into one big conversation here about, are any key things that stood out to you that you had a real crazy thing happen, or it was a very active night? I mean, I know it's hard to compress a zillion different ghost hunts into this, but like, give me a highlight reel of some of your greatest hits.
Okay, so let's concentrate on recently, because I don't know what it is, and a lot of investigators have talked about this. I've approached the subject with them, and they kind of agree that there was some sort of shift after COVID. We don't know why. We don't know how this happened. We don't, but there's something going on that for years, we'd go on these investigations and maybe have something happen, kind of small, maybe get an EVP here or there. But then all of a sudden, it seems like everywhere that we've gone in the past 3 years has had some sort of significant activity. And I don't know if that's just we've been really lucky and have gotten to investigate some excellent places. But, we've had really weird experiences at a lot of places here in West Virginia. The old hospital in College Hill in Williamson, that's one of the newer pay-to-play locations where people can come in and investigate for a fee. We have heard with our own ears, not over any recording or anything, a little girl crying and asking for her daddy. We have seen shadow figures. We had a really kind of cool experience, and I'm sad to say that I didn't get to see it, but I was kind of part of it. So it was at the old hospital in College Hill. We were on the 4th floor, which at first, nobody really told us, exactly what the activity was. Just that the cleaning crew, when the hospital was still open, refused to go up there after dark because it was terrifying. So we had one of our colleagues that was a magazine writer. He was writing an article on us. He accompanied us on this investigation for his article. And so we were all just sitting up, in this big room on the 4th floor. And we had the Ovilus on, and that's the spirit box that, instead of scanning through frequencies, actually spits out a bunch of pre-recorded words. And it said my name. And Theresa's not... It shouldn't have been in this list of 500 words.
That's not what you want to
Theresa
hear.
shouldn't have been in there. So that was kind of weird.
Yeah.
And this was the actual Ovilus box. It wasn't one of the apps. So it's not like it heard us say that and spit it out. It was actually in the pre-recorded box. So that was kind of weird. So I'm kind of looking over here at some of the investigators that are over here. And Brian, our leader, is on this side of me. And on the side here is Zach. He was the one that was writing the newspaper article. And we were all kind of looking towards this door out to the rest of the 4th floor. But I'm looking over here at my buddy, Bree, and kind of figuring out why'd the box say that and everything. And kind of looking back and forth because we had been seeing some shadow play in this doorway. And I look away, literally just for a second. And all hell breaks loose. Brian and Zach had both seen the exact same thing at the same time. They saw what looked like sort of a peachy, orange, pinkish figure poke its head around the corner of that door. And Zach was a pretty tall guy. He's well over 6 feet tall. And the way he was sitting, he was kind of sitting back like this. He crab walked almost across the whole room and landed in Brian's lap. And they were all tangled up. And they're both like, oh, what the fuck was that? Did you see that? And I'm like, what? What did you all see? So I miss seeing that, but I have seen stuff up there, really weird eye shine where there shouldn't have been any eye shine.
That place has a reputation, though, doesn't it?
It does.
That's why it's pay to play. They can get people up there.
Yeah.
That's creepy.
It was creepy.
You know, I had to mention this because I'm not a ghost hunter by any stretch of the imagination, but I have went with Theresa on a couple bits, and two things stand out. It's funny because I would call myself, I don't say I'd call myself a skeptic, but I'm the show me type. You know, and very often it's just nothing happens. I'd say I'm not that cowardly. But I was with your dad at the, what was it? It's the Whipple Company store. What's that? What state or what city is that in up there? What would you
Whipple?
say? Yeah, I mean,
it's in Fayette County, West Virginia.
Fayette County, what this was is a store that used to, it'd be where the miners would go to purchase all the stuff they needed to live, and of course you'd pay with company script, which was the company would pay you in their. It's like you'd get paid in miner fund bucks. It wasn't good for the miners, but this place, if you believe the hype, hundreds of people have died in this store. I mean, and I have no doubt some people died. I can't imagine that hundreds died. But I mean, the way that we were told, it was a lot, right? We were in a area. It was me, her father, and one other fella, and it was a big long closet, and that we had been told this is where they stored the money. I believe is what they told us, and we were in there and just milling around. We weren't taking it that seriously, and we all crowded in there. We sat there for a while. And finally, I think it was myself, I said, is anyone in here? You want us to stay or go? And the second we said that, the light turned off in that room. And man, that was creepy because the light should have turned off. So I don't know what happened. Old electricity in this place, but we got the heck out of there. That's one thing I remember. And the other thing I remember is when we visited one of your favorite haunts, the Trans-Allegheny Lunatic Asylum. We did an overnight stay there. And that's a creepy place to go. It's a beautiful place on the floors that they've recreated the look of it back when that place. I mean, this building's so old that half of it was built when Virginia was the state, not West Virginia. You can see the architectural change when West Virginia became a state, and so that shows you how ancient that place is in American standards of ancientness. And we went through that in a night, and I'd say it was I wouldn't say uneventful, but it's a creepy place to be. But about 3 in the morning, when we stumbled into what was that ward? We were in the children's.
It was the one where the children were kept was rolled.
And hard. I can tell you again, I'm a fairly skeptical guy. This place had a very heavy atmosphere, didn't it?
Yeah.
And we were hearing creepy stuff and seeing dodgy stuff, and even someone as hard as Theresa, and I'm not that big a wimp. We'd had enough.
I wasn't scared, but I got really emotional because it was just. You could feel I know it sounds sappy, but you could actually feel like the pain and sadness on that floor, and it was overwhelming.
Stories. They had told us stories about what happened in here, and it was horrible stuff to children. If you're not familiar with the Trans-Allegheny Lunatic Asylum, it's definitely worth a look. Now, I'm sure you've investigated there many times. Is it one of your favorites?
It is from a historical perspective, because there's a lot of history there and a lot of interesting history. Really, one of the more significant experiences that I've had there was, again, it was in that it was in the old Civil War section, the part that they started to build before the Civil War. And it was a group of me and 2 guys and 3 girls, and we walked into this area. And while we were in this area, all 3 of the girls all of a sudden went, ow, like that at the same time. We all had really bad cramps.
Weird.
Yeah, it was at the same time. I mean, you couldn't have timed it better. And we're like, you haven't, oh yeah. So we decided to get out of there. As we were walking out, we saw bare footprints in a puddle, like wet bare footprints coming from this puddle. They were little kid footprints, maybe that big. And they were barefoot. Nobody there, this was November, nobody there was barefoot. We all, we didn't see them coming in. And they were kind of like, following us in. We all, put our foot up against it and took pictures to, prove, okay, this wasn't any of us. Who was it that walked through that puddle barefoot and followed us in?
Now, isn't this the same area where the little girl supposed to play with the ball out in that? It's somewhere in that area. Yeah. So there's a lot of action with a kid in that area of the hospital. And the thing about the Trans-Allegheny, there are multiple buildings. I've only been in the main building, but you've actually been in like the surgery building. Haven't you been in one of the other ones?
Yeah, I haven't been in the other buildings yet. No.
It's quite a campus out there. It's funny because I believe the school for a while played football out there. They may still play. There's a big park out front. It's real pretty.
Well, for years until the current owners purchased it, it was a community center. I mean, you could go in there off the street and get your hair cut. They had plays that the patients would put on, or that they would just
Can you imagine?
Yeah, like in their big auditorium. Yeah. People would play soccer out on the lawn. They walked their dogs, and it was a place of community.
One thing they had up there was a list of the things that you could commit someone for, and it was almost always men committing women, their wives or daughters they got sick of, and like pretty much you could just walk in and say, yeah, she's bonkers. Just walk, and you're done. And also, by the way, it absolves you of the marriage. You're out. No divorce, and you're done. It never existed. So, like, what a deal for men back in those days. I mean, you could literally just ditch her right there at the door. So I guess there probably were a ton of competent, sane people in there that could put on the play, I suppose. If you of all the places you've gone, do you have any that? I mean, aside from the ones we talked about, are there any that stick out? I mean, for example, you guys were your old group sort of like ran one of the historical sections of houses in a very old section of Huntington area. Can you talk about that a little bit? That's an interesting place.
So we ran the historical and haunted tours for Guyandotte, West Virginia, which Guyandotte is now part of Huntington, but Guyandotte is actually older than Huntington by at least 60 years. That was kind of the original settlement in that area. There was a Union recruitment camp there, and I guess you could call it a battle, but it was more of a skirmish where Confederate troops came in and raided the town one evening, and so they have a Civil War reenactment there every year. Lot of history, and this is the time of year when all those houses that, luckily a lot of the houses that, are standing, predate the Civil War, so we got a lot of history in that area. But we were lucky enough to get to investigate a handful of them as part of our work with the haunted history tours.
And what's the one that was the tavern that was floated down the river?
Oh, Mady Carroll House.
The Carroll House. Then that you guys actually spent a lot of time in that place, didn't you?
Not too much, but yeah, we got to go in there a couple of times.
Guyandotte's a pretty creepy. Huntington's sort of a creepy town, but Guyandotte's behind these big flood walls.
I don't know if I ever told you the whole story, but I blame the Mady Carroll House for going into early labor with Luke.
Really?
Yeah.
Why?
Okay, so the weekend before I got put in the hospital, we helped with a spaghetti dinner fundraiser at the Mady Carroll House. And so one of the ladies that worked there was giving us a tour, and in this one room, she said that a lot of times when women go into this one room, that was the room where all of the birthing took place for the family, that women would feel like the pains of childbirth. And so, of course, my idiot self, being pregnant, I was like, well, I want to kind of feel what I'm what I'm getting myself into. So I walked into that room and didn't feel anything. So I'm like, whatever. So this was Saturday when they had the spaghetti fundraiser. And then on Sunday, this is funny, this is another whole aspect. On Sunday, my mom and I went to visit the grave of Zona Hester Shue, the Greenbrier ghost. And it was during that trip that I started kind of feeling off a little bit, woozy, a little bit of pain. That Monday is when I had my checkup, just a normal checkup. And I happened to mention some symptoms I had I didn't even see the doctor that day. It was the physician's assistant I was seeing. It wasn't scheduled for an ultrasound or anything, just check up, see what my weight was, see how I was measuring, see how my blood pressure was. And she's like, oh, well, to be on the safe side, we'll go ahead and give you a full exam, just to be on the safe side. And, Yeah.
Dehydrated.
Nope, not that one. That was before that. That was dehydrated. This is the one where there actually was you're dilated 4 centimeters.
Oh.
Yeah.
It was go time.
Yeah. They're like, we're transferring you.
You weren't what I would call the wisest steward of your pregnancy back in the day. I like that area down there, but it's also sketchy. That's what makes it so
That's why we had to stop doing our tours, because a homeless person stole a car and ran it into the river directly across the path of our tour as we were doing tours.
Yeah, but I mean, and the gravy down there is real neat. It's a fun place to visit. Just go during the day, right? Listen, we're going to come back. I want to talk to Theresa about some more classic, well-known cases in the paranormal field. I want to get a little more information from her. So when we come back, we will talk about such things as the Amityville House and other things of that ilk. We'll be right back. This is Conversations from the Dark Side.
You are experiencing Conversations from the Dark Side.
This place was really cool. Is there any other places around the mound?
What are you guys looking for?
Something scary.
We've got the perfect place, the former West Virginia Penitentiary, right across the street. Check it out.
Wow, that's perfect. We'll go there.
Awesome. Have fun, guys.
Thank you.
You are experiencing Conversations from the Dark Side.
All right, we are back on Conversations from the Dark Side again. I'm here with professional ghost hunter Theresa, and we just finished talking about some of her favorite cases in her own career. I want to touch on just a couple cases, and the reason I bring them up is just because me and Flack talked about these last week, and cases that are famous or infamous, depending on how you look at them. And the one that we talked about quite a bit last week was the case in Amityville, the Amityville House. Now, we have been involved in people giving presentations about this, about the truthfulness of this. What light can you shed on this? Because me and Flack, we knew it pretty much had been debunked. Mm-hmm. Can you give us a little backstory of what the heck happened here? I mean, we know there was actual murder in the house.
Yeah, I mean, so you did have Ronald DeFeo killed his family in the house. And then you had the Lutz family that moved in. And they got this house for a hell of a deal.
Yeah.
And then, turns out they were gone in a couple of weeks, less than a month, claiming that all kinds of crazy stuff was happening in this house. And that's a really controversial case in this field because, all of these books came out about it and then the movies. And it kind of seemed like there was a reason for it. And there have been some admissions that what really happened was the story was concocted as a money-making scheme, that the Lutzes actually could, even with a great deal, they could not afford the mortgage on this house and were trying to get back out of it. There's even some tie-in that the DeFeo lawyer may have been in on this, saying that, if, we can prove that this house had a demonic entity in it, then, maybe we can get this guy off on, insanity plea or something.
I see. They're working an angle with it. Yeah.
And what's really controversial about this case is that, love them or loathe them, the Warrens are
the wife husband team.
Lorraine and her husband. What's his name? I can't think of it right this second. Yeah, they're the mother and father of modern paranormal investigation in the United States. Ed,
Hilariously,
Lorraine, yeah, Lorraine and Ed. But they had some controversial methods. I don't.
Oh, wow, you're really being politically correct tonight.
Yeah, I mean, because like I said, love them or loathe them, they did do a lot for this field, and a lot of their methodology we actually kind of still use today.
Oh Lord!
Because
that doesn't sound like a good idea.
For the most part, a lot of cases they did try to debunk, but there's two ways to look at it. Ed, came from this from a biblical perspective. He believed fully that these were demons that they were dealing with, and maybe that kind of marred some of the truth. And then, worst case scenario is that they did kind of pass off some misinformation willingly because of the fame and the fortune.
See, I'd heard they just faked the whole thing. Let's call a spade a spade.
Okay,
here.
so I actually have this on my blog.
There you go.
There is a photo that is taken in the Amityville Horror House, and it was taken during Ed and Lorraine's investigation of the house. And allegedly, it shows one of the murdered DeFeo children, one of the small kids. You can clearly see from the other photos that were taken that night of the investigation that it's one of their assistants on his knees looking down through the balcony.
There you go. I mean,
it's clear as day.
Now, correct me if I'm wrong here, Theresa, but that house was ultimately leveled, wasn't it? I mean,
it's still there.
It's still there.
It's still there.
I thought it had been torn down.
Nope, not the Amityville house.
It's funny because that house is well known for having those windows that look almost like eyes on the side. It's a beautiful but creepy home.
So they've changed the address, and they've tried to alter the exterior so people don't find it as easily.
So did they get rid of those windows? Because if you keep those,
I think that they in the past couple of years they have changed the windows. For a while they didn't. Yeah,
it seems like I would keep the house and make a bundle. Who wouldn't want to live there now?
Well, I mean, somebody does live there. It's a private residence. Actually, I think it was on the market not too long ago. I don't know if it was purchased or not. But after the Lutzes moved out, there were no other reports from any other family that lived there of paranormal activity whatsoever.
There you go. Now, I know you mentioned that Ed came with this thing from more of a demonic standpoint. Have you, in your travels, had any cases that you would say would be more of the demonic nature than the spectral, I guess, nature?
So, I don't believe in demons from a biblical standpoint.
All right.
But I am open to the possibility that there are things in this realm that are beyond our understanding.
Sure.
And I think that we have had several cases where we've experienced something that is beyond human measure of good and evil, beyond Christianity or Satanism. I mean, it goes way back.
Some mythos stuff.
Well, I mean, the Appalachian Mountains are the oldest mountain range in the world. I mean, who knows what's lurking, in this area that just transcends our understanding. Probably, what we would, a good classification for that would be like an elemental type spirit.
Okay. And I want to, actually, I'm glad you mentioned it. I want to touch on the home state here a little bit after this. But you mentioned, since we're still on the subject of demons and demonology, what is the general consensus in the paranormal world for events like as were portrayed in The Exorcist? I believe The Exorcist is actually sort of an amalgamation of two different events, as I recall, because we did see a demonologist talk about this time. I mean, do you have a feeling when it comes to like those biblical events like exorcisms? Where do you stand on this sort of thing? I mean, do you think this is something that's actually happening? Is it insanity, a psycho reaction.
do I believe in exorcism?
Sure.
Okay.
Let's go there.
Okay, so yes and no. Let me explain. Okay, so like I said, I don't necessarily believe in the concept of biblical demonology. However, there are plenty of people who do. Some people believe that every paranormal type thing that we encounter is actually a demon in disguise trying to fool us. Some people just believe that they do exist, and it's fairly rare that we as investigators run into them, but it can happen. So if you have somebody that is dealing with what could be a demonic entity, or at least they feel like a demonic entity, there's kind of different levels of that interaction. You can be oppressed by a demonic entity without full-blown bodily possession. But okay, let's say that somebody, is oppressed or even possessed. They think that they're possessed. I'm a firm believer in mind over matter. If somebody believes that they have a demon, that they are being plagued by a demon, or that they are possessed, yeah, I think an exorcism can help them. I think that is perfectly viable as a psychological therapy for them.
But it's not so. But demons per se, say levitating someone, like you. I mean, is that something you can see within the scope of the paranormal world as you know it?
I've never seen it, and I've been in this field for a long time. I have seen things that I can't explain. I've seen people who look physically like their countenance has changed just looking at them. Their personality has changed. But there are so many things that we can blame on demons that can actually be blamed on mental illness. Now, of course, levitation. I've never seen anybody levitate. Now, if I saw somebody levitate, then that might change things around a little bit.
Fair enough. Now, here we are. I'm sure most of you know this, but we live in the great state of West Virginia, which is a hotbed of cryptozoological and paranormal interest. We have, of course, many festivals now. We've got our annual Mothman Festival. We've got the Bigfoot Festival up there. Braxton County Monster has a festival. I'm sure there are others. But you have had the pleasure of looking into several of these things. I don't know, do you consider yourself somewhat of a cryptozoologist, or just a side interest, or is there a paranormal connection there? Do you consider that entire field part of the paranormal? Like, what's your thoughts?
Actually, yeah, I think everything is connected.
Yeah.
I personally like to call myself a Fortean historian.
Oh, wow.
I like to look into the history of anything weird, anything unexplainable. My blog first started out as mostly just ghosts and hauntings, and that's where my interests have always lied, in ghosts and hauntings. But then as I've gotten older and I've investigated this field and done research in this field, I've really started to delve into the ufology, the cryptozoology, because there is a link. Haven't quite figured out exactly what the link is, but there absolutely is a link connecting all this stuff together.
Before we get into the Western side of this, real quick, since you mentioned ufology, and I can't help myself, do you have a favorite case, and have you seen a UFO?
I have seen a couple of UFOs. Nothing like major, nothing like, come down. And,
yeah.
But I have seen some strange things. One kind of funny story is my grandmother had a history of seeing UFOs. And back when I was in high school, she was living alone up on, it was a subdivision in Beckley, and she lived at the very tip top of the subdivision. And the road kept going off into the woods where this old logging road was. So she was the last house in the subdivision. And she used to see stuff like all the time. And I was spending the night with her one night, and she was doing her ritual of going around closing all the curtains and making sure all the doors were locked. And she yelled for me. She's like, "Theresa, the lights are back. If you want to see them, come in here." So I ran in there to the dining room where she had, big sliding glass French doors. And sure enough, up on the hill, there was a series of white lights. And they just kind of start out as like one in the center, and then it like multiplied, and it was like these making, it was like diamond type shapes. and then they all went back into one and zoomed up off the hill.
As I recall, your grandmother's place, she had a bunch of weird stuff happen up there, didn't she?
Not too much. I mean, she lived in 3 different places during my life, and none of them I would say were really super haunted. But I mean, she had some weird stuff at the same place that she saw that UFO. She had a really weird experience, and we kind of blame it on the UFOs just to be funny, but we don't know what exactly happened. So, you know, she's getting older. She was living up there alone, and my mom called her, as she did every night, just to check on her, say goodnight. And the phone just kept ringing and ringing and ringing. And so, of course, my mom's panicking. Why is she not answering the phone? So she said, well, maybe she's in the bathroom. Maybe she's getting ready for bed. So she calls back, and my grandma answers, and she's like, can't talk. There's an alligator on the front porch.
Oh, yeah, that's the one I was thinking of.
And slams the phone down. Okay, so this is December. So it's like freezing.
This is a real cold
This is in December. So my mom's like, oh my God, she's finally lost it. We're going to have to commit her. So she calls my uncle, who lives much closer to my grandma. And, you know, my uncle, I guess, had his cell phone, and she called his cell phone, and he picks up, and he was like, I'm already on my way. And she's like, well, call me when you know something. And so we're sitting there like, okay, what's wrong? And finally they call back. And what had happened was my uncle gets to my grandma's house, and temperatures are like, 20, degrees or not colder. Beckley is always much colder than it is down here. And she's standing on the porch in her nightgown with this bucket over something on the porch, and she's got a broom, and she's got her foot up on the bucket and is holding the broom. And I don't know how long she'd been standing like that. But my uncle's like, okay, Mom, what's going on? What you got under the bucket? She's like, there is an alligator under this bucket. So, of course, he takes the broom, and he, like, gingerly picks the bucket up. And then it's not an alligator, but it's this huge lizardy thing. And, of course, he's like, whoa, what was that? And he slams the bucket back down. And luckily, like, he had a real close buddy that worked for the DNR, and he managed to, like, take a picture of this thing. And he was like, oh, yeah, that's a hellbender. And
oh, so yeah, she got
was a
in the
hellbender.
wild.
And apparently it had come out of hibernation early and was seeking food and warmth on her porch.
Those are native. Is it only to West Virginia that have those?
I don't know. I know they're big in West Virginia, but it's hellbender. If you haven't seen one, it's a huge salamander.
Yeah,
I mean, I
would call it the state lizard.
Yeah,
cool name too, and the hellbender. That's a great story. That's outstanding.
So we always joked with her till she died that like the aliens dropped off the alligator on her porch.
When you live out in the hills or whatever the state, or you at the sticks, really, you never. I speak from experience. When you hear stuff romping and stomping through the woods, you don't have any idea if it's a gang of thugs, if it's a deer, if it's Bigfoot. It could be anything. You don't have any idea. And around here, you're always thinking, And so I want to finish up by talking about your latest project that you and your group has been. I don't know how much you can talk about it. Can you get into it at all? What you guys have been up to?
Probably say a little bit. So spectral research and investigation. Actually, we've got several projects going on. But this past weekend, we had the opportunity to join up with Uncovering History, a group of guys. One's out of Ashland, Kentucky, one of them's out of Louisiana. And they were shooting a documentary on finding the Mothman. And they ended up needing a paranormal investigation team on short notice, and we were there to assist them. So we spent an awesome weekend with this group, running around the Low Hotel in Point Pleasant, and then running around the TNT area with them, filming, trying to hunt down the Mothman.
Now, and you may work with them again at some point in the
Hopefully,
future.
yeah. They've asked us to work with them again. Hopefully, fairly soon on a case down their way in Louisiana.
Now, and this will air at some point in the near future. We'll keep everyone posted on what channel you can find it on, and the time. So that's a sort of a big deal.
It is sort of a big deal.
I mean, you worked with it wasn't just like some schmo. It was a film crew, the whole 9 yards.
It was an actual film crew, so it was an experience.
That's awesome. I it's nice to see you guys finally get into the real spotlight. And of course, now you just are coming off. I got to give you your due here. you and your group, and you in particular, were featured in our local big newspaper, the biggest newspaper in West Virginia. The Charleston Gazette had an article on you. How did that come about?
Yeah, that was really interesting. The girl who wrote the article just emailed me one day, and she's like, "Hey, I'm looking to do a feature on, ghost hunting in West Virginia. I found your blog, and it was, they said that I should contact you." And I was like, "Oh, okay, yeah, sure, I'll be happy to do it."
Two things, then, before we finish up. If you're visiting West Virginia, right, you're from out of town, we have a thing. We have a festivity in June called Boat Fest, where people from all over the world come to Hurricane to do classic computer stuff. If one of these people wanted to go somewhere in West Virginia, where would you recommend they go for like a interesting paranormal investigation, ghost hunt, monster sighting? Where should you go if you're from out of town?
I mean, it depends on really what you're super interested in. I would absolutely, if time was a factor, you just had a day or two, come to Point Pleasant. Point Pleasant has it all. Point Pleasant has Mothman. There were other cryptid sightings in Point Pleasant. There's plenty of ghosts. You could stay at a haunted hotel with lots of history. There were lots of UFO reports. So there's a lot to see and do right there in Point Pleasant. You can take your picture with the Mothman statue, see the Mothman Museum, the River Museum, visit the place where Chief Cornstalk was killed and uttered his famous curse on the town.
Yeah,
so
we're very fortunate to live near there, and I would agree with you. And if you had a little more time, you could roll up to the Trans-Allegheny Lunatic Asylum, because you're in the neighborhood of the Bigfoot Museum and the Bratsk County Monster Museum. So you've really got, within an hour and a half of here, you've really got your whatever you want in terms of paranormal investigation. Now, before we go, once again, can you tell everybody who's listening and watching where they can check out your blog, and tell them where they can check out the information and videos from your group?
All right, so you can find me and my blog, Theresa's Haunted History of the Tri-State. The best thing to do is just Google that.
You don't know your address, do you?
Well, it's Theresa's Haunted History of the Tri/State.blogspot.com.
Is it slash or dash?
Dash.
I'll put it in the show notes.
And I'm on all the social medias. I'm on TikTok and Facebook and X and whatever.
Big on TikTok, I've heard.
Yeah. I'm quickly getting a lot of TikTok views. And you can find my team's work at Spectral Research and Investigation, Huntington, West Virginia. We're on Facebook. We have all of our YouTube videos at SRI Huntington WV. That way you can see all of our awesome videos by our videographer, Casey, about our adventures and investigations.
Yeah, I mean, there's some fairly well-documented looks. I mean, you guys have been at it for really going pretty hard for the last couple of years. So there's a lot of videos there. And your blog stretches back forever.
2011.
Right, and so you've got, you documented a lot of the places you went and are going almost, pretty much you update that every couple of days, right, still?
I try to.
There it is. There it is. Well, listen, Theresa, thanks for joining me today here on Conversation with the Darkside. I'd also like to say, screw you, Dead Files. I got her, you didn't. You dropped the ball, pal.
You are experiencing Conversations from the Darkside.
The world's largest teapot was dedicated across the border in West Virginia today, but before that could happen, a lot of other things had to occur, including a little help from our Wayne Van Dyne.
And this is the world's largest teapot, a town landmark that almost wasn't. Local citizens wanted to restore it, but it was nearly falling apart from age.
Well, I went and took a look at it. And with the rotted floor, the rotted walls, the windows out, the door off, I told them to burn it. I didn't think anybody could fix it.
Someone did. It was restored by volunteers with money donated locally. But then a dispute with state highway officials over its location almost left them with no place to put it. Governor Caperton's office finally cut the red tape, setting the stage for today's celebration, which even rain failed to stop. So it's official now, the world's largest teapot has been dedicated in Chester, West Virginia. Police Chief Terry Potts, Mayor Sally Riley, I dare you
I'm a little teapot, short and stout. Here is my hand.
Wayne Van Dyne, KDKA Eyewitness News, Chester.
You are experiencing Conversations from the Dark Side.
And we're back. I hope you enjoyed that interview. Gosh, I had a lot of fun going through just the basic stuff when it comes to ghost hunting. You know, I was at best the ultimate amateur ghost hunter. I'd go out by myself and feel around, go to scary places. And it was a lot of fun. But it wasn't until I went with some of Tree's big groups to see how they do it, where the full range of equipment and approaches to the phenomena became apparent to me. And it's fun. If you are someone that believes in this sort of thing, it's quite fascinating. If you're someone who doesn't believe in it, it's still interesting to see how people approach the hobby and they derive pleasure from it. And I think that's the key thing. There is more in heaven and earth ratio than are dreamt of in your philosophy, as Bard once said. And I put a lot of stock in that. I don't have all the answers. I sort of look at it sort of the same way I look at a lot of religions. Just like I don't have the answers. I'm certainly not going to be the guy to tell you how to think. But it's still intriguing to me that something like that could still be out there. There's probably more paranormal and UFO footage now than there's ever been, and more coming in every day. Of course, it's easier to fake. It's a mixed bag when it comes to that stuff. But as the equipment improves, wouldn't it be interesting if at some point in the future, the not too distant future, a piece of equipment came along that could prove without doubt that there was an afterlife, or there was an alien out there, or there were crypto creatures out there that captured a Bigfoot? It's always something to think about. It's an interesting mental exercise if you're a non-believer. And if you're a believer, you never know. So keep believing. That's the way I look at it. So next week, once again, our good buddy Jack Flack, co-host of Conversations of the Dark Side, will be back in action. And the topic will be ghost stories. Hopefully your ghost stories. I'm hoping that we get a lot of submissions for this show. You know, I'm a big Art Bell fan from back in the day. I know it's hard to believe. And Art would always have his ghost to ghost every Halloween. And this is sort of my version, which is basically just a ripoff of his version, except less successful. But I'm hoping this time around we get a lot of people sending in their interesting stories. You can always send in any emails you have to thedarkside@email.com. We will accept any and all donations of your sighting or your experience. Of course, you can also call our toll-free number as well. Plenty of ways to get hold of us. Of course, if you'd like to message me in the Discord, our Discord does have a Conversation with the Dark Side group. You can also leave your experiences in there. You don't have to keep them secret if you don't want. You can also leave them anonymously. That's fine as well. If you don't want to leave your name, or you want to leave your board name or whatever, I'd be okay with that. But hopefully we'll get some cool ghost stories for next week. And I've got a few other surprises in the kitty. That will be the final Dark Side of 2023. I've really enjoyed these first three editions. Gosh, it's great to have Flack right there with me, and it was fun to have Bode on, and to have a fun conversation about ghost hunting with Theresa, about movies and TV with Flack, and of course with all you fine folks. So I do hope you enjoy this interview with Theresa Racer, the Ghost Hunter. Please check out her blog. It'll all be listed in the show notes, and we will catch you guys next week for the final Conversations of the Dark Side for 2023.
You have just experienced Conversations from the Dark Side. Until next week, try to enjoy the daylight.